actually started early for me because on February 19th, my husband, bless his heart, fell onto the subway tracks.
Oh my.
And it was all very dramatic, and it was on the news, and he got saved by this anonymous angel that the police say that's confidential. I can't even thank this person, but William was pretty badly injured. So he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And while I was going there every day, the coronavirus started happening, and they started first with little warnings like maybe you shouldn't take public transportation if you can avoid it. So I was taking a lot of taxis and thinking, I wonder how long this is going to last, this is getting expensive. But then obviously as time passed, it was like, just don't go out. And so thank goodness he did get released before we were actually went on lockdown. And it's sweet in so many ways to be home and be simple and just see how many self-sufficient things we can do. I mean, I've made curry powder, I've made disinfecting room spray. I can do everything except a blow dry. I mean, I really feel very, blessed in all these ways. And yet, every time I have to take my dog out for a walk, it's this big deal with the mask and the gloves and the glasses. I had Dr. Brooke Goldner on my Main Street Vegan podcast yesterday, and she was talking about you just can't be too careful. So I go through this whole rigmarole, and then, I've invented this sort of parkour game to play outside with the dog. It's like, there's a person and he's approaching 6 feet, jump out of the way. And then I come in and have to do the big ritual of cleaning everything and spraying everything and washing everything and cleaning off the dog's feet. And he looks at me like, you didn't used to do this to me. What on earth happened? And I think we're all kind of asking ourselves that.
Yeah, well, you seem to be handling it really well with all that's going on, that with the world, but with your husband. And I'm so sorry, by the way, because I'm recovering from a very mild traumatic brain injury, and it does take a while for your world to come back to the way you remember it.
Yeah. Have you had headaches with that?
Yeah, headaches. My thing is really ocular now. It's more visual disturbances and eye pain. And I actually had an appointment yesterday with the Shares Eyes, the vegan neurologist. And because there's no doctor's visits, we were able to do telemedicine with them. Right. And I did tell them, I did say, Victoria wants you on her podcast. So we'll see what they say. But yeah, it does. But they expect, or at least for me, a full recovery, but it takes a while. But all the tools in their tool belt, I don't know if they're doing this for your husband. She's going to be giving me all these cognitive games to play and things that will work my brain so that it goes back to, because I have a little bit of memory loss, but I know I'm going to be fine. So I really like to go back to your husband. Good. But that's amazing, though, that he was rescued by an angel. That's just
that's pretty good. Well, he's having telemedicine tomorrow as well. He just got a plant-based doctor, Dr. Diego Ponyman, here in New York City as his primary care. But evidently, Dr. Ponyman is out on the front lines working with the coronavirus. So William is going to be talking with one of his associates tomorrow. But for me, the most dramatic thing that has happened since this has been going on was part of William's injuries was that his jaw was very badly broken and had to be reconstructed. So his appointment to have the wires removed that were holding his jaws together was last Friday, and he hadn't eaten in 30 days. I mean, clear liquids, 30 days. And so he really needed to get those removed, but the plastic surgeon's office was closed. And so our neighbor from across the hall did the procedure. And I mean, it's not like major surgery or anything. And yet it just seems so like kind of battlefield conditions, but we're so lucky. I mean, we have lots of angels, not only the angel that saved him, but our neighbor across the hall is a physician's assistant who had assisted on jaw surgeries. So she was able to do that, which means that William can eat a lot of stuff, no peanut butter or some things, because he still has these braces on, like jaw braces, which are supposed to come off in 2 weeks, and heaven knows when they actually will. But it's like we're all accommodating, and I think we're all feeling like we are more flexible than we thought we could be.
Nice. There is somebody watching live whose name is none other than Victoria Moran.
Seriously?
Yep. Isn't that cool?
Well, I know there's another Victoria Moran here in New York City, and sometimes I will go. She's a very self-care kind of person, because whenever I have gone to places like facial places and stuff, they'll ask which Victoria Moran I am. So I don't know if that's this one or another one.
So Victoria that's watching live, tell us where you're from, because that's so cool. You've got that's your doppelganger, I guess. So people are saying they love you so much, Victoria.
Aw.
Nina says she first saw you speak in 2012 at the North American Veg Fest in PA. She was one of my favorite speakers and I've loved her ever since. So
Thank you. Well, speaking of doppelgangers, we are almost birthday doppelgangers. I mean, there's 10 years in between. You were a mere babe in the woods, but our birthdays are just a day apart. So we both have that fiery Aries energy.
I know. Linda Middlesworth is watching, loves you,
Oh, hi,
Victoria.
Linda.
So that's cool. And Thomas from California Balsamic Vinegar. We got a lot of rock stars in the house. That is, I just love that you haven't crumbled in all this, because it seems like New York has the most cases, or at least the most fatalities. And because I guess such a smaller area with more people, that, it must be scary out there.
Yeah, it is. It's like every time I go really out, which is just to walk Forbes, my dog, I feel like, okay, I'm really going out into the danger area. But even just to go outside my apartment, to go down the hall with the trash or to do laundry, it's like almost, I don't know, enemy territory. And I realize that sounds a little bit extreme, but that's the feeling. And I think what we're dealing with is a lot of really primal stuff, because certainly there's survival. And when you're the age, that I now am, that is the age at which a lot of people do not do well, who get this particular ailment. And I have to say, in my own life, the only time I was ever close to death was with a case of the flu that I got in France in the early 1990s. So I know how serious the flu can be. So there's that kind of fear, but then there's all the unknown fear. Like, everybody's, are restaurants going to be opening again, or can they just not make it? And jobs and businesses and the stock market and all that. It's just a lot of unknown. And I feel so grateful for a lot of the spiritual stuff that I have had the privilege to be associated with for many years. Just little simple, almost just cliches like one day at a time, and you're not given more than you can handle. That kind of stuff really helps when you need it.
Yeah, my favorite right now is this too shall pass.
Amen.
Yeah.
That was actually the Chiron on Good Morning America the other day. I couldn't believe it. Instead of, coming up at 10:15, blah, 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 it was this too shall pass. I thought it was brilliant.
You mentioned that when we were talking personally. Can I say your age? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're then
right.
It'll tell yours.
Okay, yeah, because I'm 10 years behind her, but she's 70, guys. She was at one point, actually, Linda Middlesworth was also voted this, and she's also over 70, extraordinarily beautiful vegan influencer, and they were both vegan sexiest vegan over 50, and now they're both over 70, and they still are. So whenever, she's always going to be 10 years older than me, but she sure doesn't look 70, if you ask me. So anyway, New York, at NYU, the head of the infectious disease department was on CNN and talking about how younger people are succumbing to the coronavirus in a way that's much different than in China. Can you talk about that? You and I love how you say you're an obesity survivor.
Yeah, well, it was fascinating because we've always heard, I heard somebody early on in the pandemic say, this disease is the grim reaper for the elderly, but it is starting to do some grim reaping for young people in this country in a way that it did not in China. And what she was saying this morning is, and this is a direct quote, obesity is a risk factor for this disease. And it can be such a touchy topic to talk about because obviously we want to accept everybody and celebrate everybody. And this is not about body size or what fashion likes or anything like that. This is about, oh my goodness, it is a fact that just like for arthritis and heart disease and diabetes and so many other things, obesity appears to be a risk factor for the coronavirus.
Yep. That's what the doctors are saying. And that's why I do this summit, not to shame or blame people. I know how hard it is. Both of us were obese at one point, but it is health at every size, at least according to the doctors that I interview, is just, it's a wish. It's not true. And that's why it's so important when we have situations like this, that we get our health under control and do our best controlling our weight, because you are more likely to succumb when you have extra weight.
Yeah, I mean, I was not healthy as a very young person. I was hypoglycemic and pre-diabetic at 21. And, I'm not now at 70. And that's kind of counterintuitive. It's supposed to go the other way, but it doesn't have to. And that's just one of the many wonderful things about this way of living and this way of eating. And the other thing I love so much about this, AJ, is that it's the only kind of lifestyle change that once you get into it, it's like you're on The Price is Right, and all these doors open up. And behind every door, there's another wonderful world to discover, whether it's ethics or the environment or vegan fashion or raising vegan kids or vegan travel. I mean, it's all back there, and we get our health back. You just can't beat it.
Absolutely. People are just saying, wow, beautiful at 70. She's not
Aw.
70. Wow, 70. So beautiful. Angie made a comment that vaping is contributing as well. Yeah, we have young people doing. That's something that,
Mhm.
people smoked when I grew up, but we didn't have vaping back then.
Well, it's the same thing. You know how some of the doctors will say, we love to hear good news about our bad habits. And when vaping first started, it was supposed to be not a healthy thing to do, but a certainly healthier thing to do than smoking cigarettes. And now we know that it has its own problems, many very similar to cigarettes and some other ones as well. So it just seems like the good old straight and narrow is always going to be the place to be. And I think, people like you, AJ, are making it sexy. The straight and narrow used to be, well, who wants to do that? Well, nowadays, a lot of people want to do that as well. We ought to.
Making kale sexy. So Tinker says, well, it's going to take me years to get rid of my extra weight. So what does that mean in regards to them saying obesity is a risk factor for corona? Well, it's a risk factor for every disease. And I hope at some point you consider watching the summit. But what you can do right now is, of course, if you have lots of weight to lose, you're not going to lose it overnight, but you can change what you put in your mouth with the very next meal and make sure that everything you eat is health promoting, is nutrient dense, is plant-based, unprocessed. So that is something you can do right now.
Absolutely. And for me, the great joy for me, because I lost weight, oh God, dozens of times, hundreds of times, I'm not sure. I had Josh Lajani also yesterday was on my podcast. And so a lot of you know him. He was 420 pounds at one time and had this very dramatic weight loss story. And he's now an elite runner. And, if you said, how much did I lose? Well, I only lost 60 pounds. But I lost that same 60 pounds over and over and over again. If it had all, gone up, I could have been the biggest person ever. But the great joy for me when it was finally the last time, and that was 36 years ago. So my weight loss history, weight has not been a problem for me for 36 years. That's a long time. Was that I knew that I had succeeded the first day that I didn't hurt myself with a fork. It had always before been, oh, you have to weigh this number, you have to wear this size. No, it's very different when you look at it in the way that I do it and the way that Chef AJ does it. Once you're on this path, you are a success. And that number on the scale is something that will happen at such time as it's supposed to happen. And you don't want to rush it like crazy, because you need to do it, with a little bit of slowness so that it'll last and your body gets used to what's going on and all that. But you are a success from day one. So congratulations for being here.
So where people are talking about your skin, my skin, we have comments like, we both have beautiful skin. What is the secret to your beautiful skin? And then I'll tell you the secret to mine if they're talking about my skin as well.
Oh, I think it's just all connected. And one thing about skin, it's really interesting. It's a way that we can all kind of do a check on how we're doing. How are we doing with our food, with our hydration, with our rest, with our exercise, with our sun exposure? It really shows us quickly. It might take years before you develop some kind of disease with a name, but your skin can show you in just really a week or so if you've been, eating too much what Dr. Goldner was calling recreational foods, or if you've been staying up too late or worrying too much about coronavirus or something else, it starts to show on the skin. So for me, I do avoid the sun. And I know there's some controversy about that because obviously the sun's a beautiful thing and it's out there for our joy and it makes vitamin D. But I'm really pale. And so I do not and have not in my life done a lot of sun exposure. And I'm grateful at this point for that. And I also really think hydration is huge. And that's a hard one for me because I've never been one who really enjoyed drinking water. But putting a little bit of lemon in it means that I can drink water and keep all kind of puffy a little bit. I remember having an elderly cat. My cat Henrietta lived to be 23, but in her later years, she developed kidney problems, as a lot of cats do, and she had to go on fluids. And as soon as she went on fluids, people would come to visit and they would say, "What's going on with Henrietta? She looks like a young cat." And I learned from my elderly cat that hydration, just your skin likes that, and not just water, but high water content foods. So the smoothies, the fresh fruits, the salads, this is perfect water. And if you hang out with a lot of health people, they argue a lot about water and they'll talk about, it needs to be alkaline or it needs to be distilled or it needs to be spring. You know what? The water in fresh fruits and vegetables is all that stuff. So it's perfect and it helps us be a little closer to perfect too.
Well, I agree with you about the sun. And you're talking to somebody that has been a sun worshiper their whole life, that never wore sunscreen, that would bake in my teen and 20s with baby oil. And then a year and a half ago, I moved to the desert and I got this horrible brown spot on my face. And I went to, first I went to the dermatologist and he sent me to the plastic surgeon. It's kind of a long story, but the bottom line, what I had to do to treat it, but the bottom line is I do not allow sun on my face anymore. I allow sun on my body. I don't mind going outside, but I wear this huge floppy hat now that goes all the way across so that all you see is my eyes. That's actually how I got the concussion, but that's another story. But I agree with you. I think we need what the sun provides, but I don't think we necessarily need it on the skin on our face. And I think that
And hands too. I've lived in New York City for 20 years, and so I haven't driven very much in all that time. But I have more of those brown spots on my left hand because I used to drive. So if you're listening to this and you're 30 or something and thinking, what does this have to do with me? Oh, it has plenty to do with you because you're creating your later life now. I mean, another sun lesson I had when I was 18, I lived in London and I was there by myself, and this lovely family kind of adopted me. This woman, she was actually my Weight Watchers lecturer at the time. But anyway, I went with her family to the airport to meet their 23-year-old daughter who was coming home after spending 2 years in Israel lifeguarding. And I couldn't believe it. The mother, the other daughter, that beautiful kind of British skin, and the daughter who had spent 2 years in the sun lifeguarding looked older than her mother. So, those lessons can stay with you.
Absolutely. So how do you feel about aging though? Because I wasn't really thrilled turning 60, to be honest. I mean, you seem to have embraced it beautifully. And I mean, other than being vegan, are there any special foods that you feel have made it much easier for you to accept 70?
Yeah, well, you've asked two questions and I'll try to answer both of them. I didn't like aging, especially at 50. 50 really threw me because, it went along with menopause and a lot of weird stuff happens then. I can remember waking up right around that midlife period and thinking, who stole my body? What happened to my flat stomach and my round butt? They've been switched around. And I mean, it was horrifying. And so I wrote a book. I did all kinds of research and I wrote a book called Younger by the Day because I actually believed I have to fix this. But obviously we're all going forward, there's no fixing the direction in which we're going. Now, 60 was different for me. I think I just decided the 60s are going to be fantastic. And I wasn't so sure about 70 because, my grandparents died in their 70s. And I think I got this idea in childhood, 70, that's when people die. I wasn't like, woohoo, look at 70. But two people said some very hopeful things that helped me a lot. One is the wonderful woman who actually wrote, she's written a couple of amazing books, and I'm blanking on the name. Oh, I'll tell you, and you can put it on your, your information in writing. But anyway, wonderful author. And she said that her vision is for people to say about her years in the future, she did her best work in her 70s. So that was cool. And then just after my birthday, I heard from Alex Hershaft, the wonderful founder of Farm Animal Rights Movement. He's in his 80s. He's a Holocaust survivor, an incredible human being. And he said, oh, I remember 70, the best time of my life. So I want to really learn from people who are going through this at the same time as me and who are further along the path, that this can really be terrific. And then in terms of foods, for me, it's the stuff with color. It's the fruits and the vegetables and all that really watery stuff. And I have to tell you, as a compulsive eater, as somebody who liked dense food enough to get to be 60 pounds overweight numerous times, my favorite foods are not celery and apples. And yet, that's the kind of food that seems to make people youthful for an extended period of time.
Yep, fruits and vegetables, absolutely. So let's see. Oh, I have a sign at my house that you'd probably like. It says, may the rest of your life be the best of your life.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yep, absolutely. So I love Victoria, Colleen says. I was reading her books long before I became vegan or finding my beautiful chef AJ. Well, thank you so much. And I'm sure she appreciates that as well. Christy says, you're creating your later life now. I love that. Great words of wisdom. So you a few times you've alluded to your podcast. So tell people about that. I'm not sure everybody's familiar with it or how to access it.
Okay. We have been a live radio show and podcast for the past 8 years, and it's called Main Street Vegan. So you can find it online on your favorite podcast app or at my website, mainstreetvegan.net, or at the network where it originates, Unity Online Radio. And we do a new live show every Wednesday afternoon, which most people now listen to the podcast. We're so used to just listening to what we want to listen to when we want to listen. And yet there's something so magical as we're experiencing now about doing anything live. So yesterday, for example, we had a caller. And if you listen live at Unity Online Radio on Wednesday afternoons, you get the initial experience, and you can call in if you like. Otherwise, we're on all podcast platforms. And what I think is unique about the Main Street Vegan podcast is that it celebrates all things vegan. Because people will say to me, well, are you an ethical vegan? Are you a health food? It's like I'm an everything vegan. I mean, I got into this for the animals. I actually didn't think it would be good for my health. I thought that all those carbs would make me stay heavy forever and I'd end up diabetic and whatnot. And of course, it's been just the opposite. And then I've learned about the environment and world hunger and the spiritual aspects of not taking pain and suffering into myself, into my body, which reflects then on my psyche. So yeah, it's everything. And so our guests are just cutting edge people, whether we're talking physicians or animal rights people or animal behaviorists or environmental experts or the occasional celebrity. So it's really fun. I hope you all will start listening. And we have a listeners group on Facebook, the Main Street Vegan Podcast Listeners Group. That's kind of our inner circle if you wanted to be part of that.
Well, that sounds really great. And I don't know if people know this about you, but you're also a movie producer. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I am so proud of this film, and I can do that because I'm not the filmmaker. I'm just the producer. And the filmmaker is Thomas Jackson, and the film is called A Prayer for Compassion. It premiered as in theatrical release 1 year ago this month, and on April 1st, it's going to be streaming on Amazon Prime. So, A Prayer for Compassion is a beautiful film that is introducing vegan living to people who identify as religious or spiritual. And you think low hanging fruit, like, yeah, well, shouldn't people who are talking about love and mercy and treating the body as a temple and stuff like that, be into this? Well, not as much as you might think. And so Thomas went to the climate conference in Morocco. He went to India, and he talks to people, and gosh, almost every religion you've ever heard of. I mean, a wonderful Zoroastrian veterinarian, Dr. Armighty May in California, and Bob Isaacson of Dharma Voices for Animals is Buddhist, and Lisa Levinson from In Defense of Animals is a women's spirituality, earth religions person. Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, an amazing person bringing in the Jewish point of view. So we've just got everybody in this film. And I think you walk away with the idea of, whatever you believe, whatever your worldview, however you see the big picture, we can all agree that compassion is at the heart of it. So let's stop eating animals. Let's start treating ourselves and others with love. So, A Prayer for Compassion, you can watch it right now on Vimeo, and you have to rent it for a couple of bucks, or you can wait until April 1st and get it streaming on your Amazon Prime.
I cannot wait. That's great. Linda Middlesworth says 70s are her favorites so far as well.
Goody.
When we were talking about sayings that are getting us through this time of crisis, I was thinking one I like. I believe it's from the movie The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, where he says, everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end.
Amen.
So somebody is asking, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say one that somebody sent me comes from a wonderful 14th century mystic, Julian of Norwich, but she's female. And in fact, interestingly enough, she's the first woman writer, absolutely known to be a writer. There may have been some others using fake names, but we know that she was a woman and a writer. And she said, all will be well. All manner of things will be well. All and everything will be well. And I thought, thank you for reiterating that, because sometimes in a situation like this, just one little all is well is not enough. So, and she said that during the bubonic plague.
Wow. That's optimism, really, isn't it? So you had mentioned that when you first changed your diet, you were worried about the carbs, but you don't worry about them anymore. And we have a question from Marcy who says, please advise about how much grains should be in one day. I think I'm not having much success, possibly from liking rice too much. I'll let you take that first.
Well, I think different people find their way on that particular question very differently, because there are people who do extremely well with a diet very high in grains. I mean, I remember when macrobiotics were big, and I still know people who healed themselves of cancer and other serious diseases with a macrobiotic approach, very high in grains and cooked vegetables. And then we know that other people heal on something that looks almost the opposite, that's almost all raw foods and fresh fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and maybe no grains at all, and unless they're sprouted. So I think you just need to find your own way there. I mean, statistically and based on the studies, grains are excellent. The populations that eat a lot of whole grains do the best. This is a way to provide that satiety and that kind of stick to your ribs sort of groundedness without getting into the fats and the processed foods. Personally, I don't eat a lot of grains. I'm just not attracted to them. I think I get that same sort of satisfaction from sweet potatoes, white potatoes, I know a lot of people don't like white potatoes. I do, maybe because I'm half Irish, whatever. I eat them. Yellow fin potatoes, any kind of potato is a friend of mine. But I think you just want to watch what's going on in your life, and you can always try some things. That's one of the cool things. This is Forbes. You want to see Forbes, my
Yes,
dog?
absolutely. We've been having
Forbes,
people share
say
their pets.
hello. There he
Oh,
is.
he's so cute. Oh, wait, what does your shirt say? I got to see your shirt because
My
people are
shirt
asking about my shirt.
says, "In the mood for vegan food."
I love it.
Thanks.
The people are asking where I got my shirt, and I honestly don't know the name. You know how sometimes when you're on Facebook, like an ad will appear? I clicked it, and so I don't know.
It's a great shirt.
Yeah, I
vegan
love it.
love. Cool.
Yep.
So, I think sometimes we have this idea like, okay, I read this book and now I have to do everything the way that book said to do it. But there's a great big world out there. And absolutely, you want to be plant-based and you want to be unprocessed. I mean, there just aren't good arguments for killing and eating our fellow creatures or for eating food that has been killed before it ever got to you. You can kill plants too. You take all the good out of them and turn them into a Pringle. So that's not what we want to do. But once you're in the plant-based camp, then see what works for you, see what works better for you. And that's why, we have Dr. McDougall and his Starchitarian, and then we've got somebody more like Dr. Furman, who's a little bit more on the fruits and vegetables. And then we've got Dr. Goldner, who's like raw until dinner time. So try it all out and you'll find your way.
Absolutely. Zena says, potatoes, a woman after my own heart. I'm like you. I mean, I love all starch, but potatoes and sweet potatoes are my favorite. So somebody's asking about your week-long program.
Oh, bless them. So back in 2011, when I was working on my book that I knew was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan, the publisher didn't like Main Street. And so they said I had to come up with another title, and I was trying to come up with another title, and I had a vegan miracle. I ran into Michael Moore, the filmmaker, on the street. Long story short, he called the editor and talked her into letting me keep the title Main Street Vegan. And when she called me 3 days later to say that she had convinced the higher ups and that was indeed the name of my book, I knew that other things were supposed to happen. And one of the ideas that popped up in that moment was there needs to be Main Street Vegan Academy, training and certifying vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. And so I put it out there, and I didn't know if anybody would come because I didn't have a big reputation at that time in the plant-based world. I had done some plant-based books, some vegan books way back in the 80s and the early 90s. But since then, I was in the spirituality world and doing other things, other places. And so I didn't know if anybody would come, but 13 amazing people came. And we have been going ever since. And we are an in-person program. And I know that there are limitations to that, like right now, we're going to have to put off a couple of the classes. And yet there's something so magical about getting your body to New York City, which is kind of Disneyland for vegans, and getting to know the faculty. We have a wonderful faculty that includes people like Dr. Robert Ostfeld from the Montefiore Cardiac Wellness Program, the vegan fashion designer Joshua Katcher, a vegan pastry chef Fran Costigan, a vegan business expert David Bensequin. We just have these, and JL Fields, who's a wonderful cookbook author. So these people are just stunning, and you get to hang out with them and learn from them and be with them, and also get really close to your class group. And then we take field trips and we go to vegan businesses all over New York City. And so many people have been inspired not just to become a coach and educator, but to start their own businesses. So we've got Kat Mendenhall cowboy boots in Dallas, fabulous custom vegan cowboy boots. We have a Crema, which is in Colombia, and that is a cheese and yogurt company. We also have a cheese and yogurt company called Bright Life Foods in upstate New York. The wonderful deli in Philadelphia called V Marks the Shop. That's our graduates. So people just get these ideas, they come here, and then when they go home, we offer the support. So we have a private Facebook group, we have seminars, we have reunions. So if you just want to come for a week and get your certification and go off into the world, that's great. But if you want to stay connected, that's even better, because we really, really help each other. Hope you'll want to be part of it. You can just go to mainstreetvegan.net and read all about it.
Well, we have an alumni on watching, Rabbi Beth, saying that she's an alumni of your program, that it's awesome and highly recommended. She's lucky because she already lives in New York. She didn't have to go anywhere.
Hi, Beth. Yeah, it was wonderful to have her. And that's one of the things that just amazes me, of how people make their way here. And so, you said Beth is a rabbi. We've had medical doctors, registered dietitians, lots of yoga teachers and personal trainers. And it's just, and they've come from 29 countries. So people find their way. And sometimes people say, oh my goodness, it's a week in New York. I have to get there. I have to find a place to stay. Well, I think that's part of the magic of it, because I used to wonder, it's 5.5 days, and yet people leave here and do these extraordinary things that they weren't doing before. What happened? And I think part of what happened is that people are extraordinary before they come here, because they're willing to kind of go out on a limb and go to a strange city, and for some people to strange country. Some people show up here and they're from Tanzania or Australia or Argentina or wherever, and they've never been to the US before or to New York City, and yet they're brave. And I think bravery is rewarded.
How many people are in how often do you do this, and how many people are in a program?
Oh, usually 4 times a year. This year it's going to be 2. But yeah, we do 15 to 20 people, because we do the lecture portions in my home. This is New York City, where square footage is a big deal. And so to do it outside somewhere would really make it cost prohibitive. And I want as many people to be able to experience this as possible. So we keep it at 20 or under. And I make everybody breakfast, because I learned after the first class that if you don't feed people, you won't start on time. And we have a welcome dinner, usually catered by Beyond Sushi. And we go out for lunches, and we just have a high old time. And then what people get at the end is a workable, respected certification that they can take out into the world and use. It has helped people get actual jobs in plant-based and vegan companies, and be published by real publishing houses. It's pretty cool. My daughter has told me that she is not going to have human children, so I won't have grandchildren, but I have graduates. And even though some of them are almost my age, it's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a fabulous program. I wish I lived closer. I could be an instructor, but New York seems so far right now.
Well,
and to hang out with Robert Osfeld, how fun is that, right?
Oh, that's really fun. What a sweetie.
All you New York vegans like Robert Osfeld and Dr. Michelle McMacken, do you guys just like hang out every day?
Not really, especially not the doctors, because they're so incredibly busy. But Dr. McMacken has also presented for Main Street Vegan Academy. We're very lucky. I think one great thing about New York City, especially Manhattan, is it's such a small island that even though everybody is very busy, people come here to make their mark in the world. And so everybody's trying to pay their mortgage and do all these almost impossible things. And so getting together can be a little bit challenging. And yet I think we all know that we're all here. And that's a good feeling.
Nice. So I'm going to read this question. Neither Victoria or I are doctors, but I want to read it just to acknowledge, because the person wrote it. And if you can answer it, please do. Lori says, how do you feel about HRT, that's hormone replacement therapy, benefits for aging after menopause, assuming, of course, we're eating a whole food plant-based diet and exercising and enjoying a healthy lifestyle? I mean, just this week I interviewed Dr. Lori Marbus. She does telemedicine. This is something I would definitely, get a doctor's opinion on, but I'll see if Victoria has an answer.
Yeah, well, this is really controversial, but I will tell you that I take a very small dosage of bioidentical hormones and have for a really long time. And when I don't, I cycle back into hot flashes. And people say, no, you don't, you're too old. And it's like, well, thank you for telling me what I'm too old for. And I wish I were too old for that, but I'm not. And so I take it. And I am happy with it and I feel good about it. And I would never tell anybody else to do anything that they're not comfortable with. So I think, like so many other things, you find your way.
Now, where do you stand on exercise? I mean, I'm guessing you do it,
Well,
whether you like it
yeah,
or
I do it. I have never grown to love it. I kind of love it more now during coronavirus than I used to, simply because it is being denied me. There's a sign on the gym in my building, closed until further notice. And I want to say, how dare you? I need to work out. Well, there were other days, it's like I would look for any excuse not to cross that door. But obviously, it's absolutely essential. Some people would say it's even more important than diet. I'm not sure I would go that far, but it's certainly hand in glove. One of my favorite books that's not plant-based oriented, but really tells the exercise story is Younger Next Year. Was for men, and then they did one called Younger Next Year for women, basically the same book. But it really got me to understand that we're not just talking about building muscle and building bone and burning calories and sleeping better and strengthening your heart and strengthening your lungs and all these other things that are wonderful and that we all know about. But even beyond that, it is activity that gets the message that you're still in the game. So the way this doctor and co-author explained it was that in prehistoric times, when there was a lot of starvation, basically people would just go in the cave in the winter and not move, and a lot of them would die. And the body just kind of gave up on them, like, nah, don't worry about, immunity and all that kind of thing, because this person's dying anyway. But activity tells the body that it still needs to work for you. So that has helped me a lot to get exercise in my life on a regular basis in a way that I had not done it before reading that book. And another thing that has helped me a lot is to start with yoga. So the reason I say start with yoga is I come from an obesity background. I was a fat kid. I still identify as a compulsive overeater in recovery. And so I never got that imprinting of, oh, isn't it fun to run and play and sweat? It's like, no, I was the fattest kid in class and it wasn't fun. Thank you. And so I had to find some way to move my body that enabled me to still be me. And I was always the kid, and I'm still the adult, who's thinking about the big picture and the higher power and, what's it all about, Alfie, and all that. And so yoga let me take my soul when I went to the studio, which was absolutely stunning. And to this day, if I'm going through a phase of what I call activity resistance disorder, I actually invented that condition in my book, The Good Karma Diet. Activity resistance disorder, ARD for short. I figured if it gets to be a real disorder that insurance will pay for, people could get help with it. But activity resistance disorder is I cannot exercise. I cannot open the door to the gym, much less go in. I cannot. It's almost like paralysis. And I know it's real because I get it. And yet I can always do yoga, always, because it speaks to me at a deeper level. And then once I get the mat out and I do the yoga, then it's like, well, gosh, the treadmill's right over there. Why not do that? And then, oh, look, there is some weights. Why not do those too? And I find, it's kind of the gateway exercise for me. And maybe that'll work for somebody else too.
we're like two peas in a pod. That's where I got my start, and I love yoga. I practice a kind called yin or restorative. I don't do the hot, sweaty, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important too. I mean, when I started, there was only one kind of yoga and we called it yoga. And now it's classical hatha yoga. And there are all these other kinds. And some of them, like you talk about the yin and the restorative, are they're almost massage-like, except you only need yourself to do it. And then, there's the vinyasa that keeps moving. That's really not my thing, because to me, the reason I love yoga is that you do the posture and then you just get to be there. And when you're there, all those benefits are happening for your body and for your mind. But if you like to move and flow, then vinyasa is your thing, or Ashtanga, make you sweat. It's all good.
Yep. So Michael Moore endorsed your book, Main Street Vegan. So obviously you
Yeah.
know him. Were you ever, he's such an influential filmmaker. Were you ever able to influence him maybe to consider going vegan for the, for the animals, for the environment, for his health, or to make a movie about it?
Yeah. Well, I'm not the only one who's worked on him. He has a lot of vegans around him. For his last film, I think half of his crew was vegan. His editor was what's his Jenny Brown's husband. They started Woodstock Farm Animal Sanctuary. So I mean, he had vegans around him, and I don't know. I can't speak for another human being. It's not like we're really close, but I think part of it has to do with image. And in fact, when How Not to Die first came out, I gave Michael Moore a copy for Christmas. And he and Dr. Greger were in the same green room in Detroit, about to be on a TV show there. And he told Dr. Greger, I just don't think my people, my working class blue collar people are ready for vegan. But my thought is everybody's ready because everybody wants to live long and live well and leave a great world for their kids. It just needs to be packaged in such a way that it's not threatening.
Yep. Great. Zena says, can you ask Victoria if she remembers a story she once told about taking some furniture back to Ikea and a woman who was a ballet dancer? I've been trying to remember it. It was great.
Oh, how sweet she is to remember that. I do remember that. Yeah, we were not too long in New York City. We were living over on the East Side, and we didn't have an IKEA in New York City. So I had to hire this guy called Schmuck with a Truck to drive me to New Jersey. And I bought all this IKEA stuff, and it was all fine, except for one piece, which was a desk. And it literally came in 8,000 pieces, and they give you that little thing that looks like an L shape that's supposed to miraculously put it all together. Well, I couldn't do it. My husband couldn't do it. The building super couldn't do it. So I had to call back Schmuck with a truck, who was not cheap, and go back to New Jersey. And I was so angry about this. It's like, how dare these people sell me this thing that has all these pieces, and then I have to put it together, and then I have to go all the way out here, and I was standing in the take back line, and I'm really tense, and I'm really angry, and I look in the line, and everybody else is tense and angry, except this one woman. And I guess she was maybe 35, and she had been a ballet dancer or taken ballet as a kid. And I knew this because her feet could do this like first position, fifth position thing as if it didn't even hurt. And she's there doing her beautiful bends and her beautiful balances and her lovely plies. And she was the only person in that line who was not only not miserable, but actually having a very nice time and contributing to her own well-being, physical and mental. And that's when I learned a very powerful lesson that flexibility isn't just about the body. It's about the mind, and it's about being able to adapt to standing in a long line at IKEA or hanging around at home because of coronavirus. So thanks so much for asking that.
That's actually a perfect story for what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Listen, you guys have any more questions for Victoria? Otherwise, it is time for sweet potatoes and broccoli here in California. My favorite lunch. What's your favorite? My, it's funny. My favorite meal is the one that I eat every day, and I could eat anything I want, but I'd rather just keep eating a hand of yam and broccoli because I really like it.
Yeah. Well, I'm seasonal, not being in California. So in the warmer weather, it's this giant salad. And I always talk about how I buy my salad bowls at a restaurant supply house because that's the only place that has them big enough. And so I make a wonderful salad. Arugula is my favorite green, but I do other kinds of greens and cabbage and shredded carrot and all the other stuff, and some beans or some potatoes or some steamed broccoli or all of the above. So that's summer. And then winter is beans and greens. And in a nice big pot. Well, first I steam the onion and garlic. I used to always saute, and that kept me in the oil business for a lot longer than I should have been in the oil business, because I just didn't like onions that weren't sauteed. But now I've learned that if I steam them, they're really, really good. And I'll put some mushrooms in there too. And then I'll put that in the skillet with some spices, some turmeric and black pepper. And then I'll put in beans, and then I'll put in greens. And it cooks in about 5 minutes, or 2 if the green happens to be spinach. And that's winter lunch.
Nice, nice. We have
Yeah.
a question. How much water do you both drink a day? I don't drink water. I drink pot liquor and herbal tea, but I hope that's okay. But you mentioned hydration earlier for beautiful
Yeah,
skin.
well, I drink mostly lemon water, although I have to say, and if you listen to the current Main Street Vegan podcast with Brooke Goldner, you might start drinking a lot more. Like, I have this thing that's 28 ounces. So every morning I do that much lemon water. And then I do whatever I do through the day. And I always thought I was cool. But after listening yesterday to Dr. Goldner, and she's talking about 96 ounces for people 120 pounds and under, and 120 ounces for people over 120 pounds. So I'm like, well, let's see. I'm going to do at least 2 of these 28 ounces today. I'm not going to do 96 today, but I certainly have it in my psyche that moving toward that might be a reasonable idea.
Wow, I pee so much as it is just because I eat so many fruits and vegetables. I can't imagine increasing my fluids. My water bottle is 27 ounces and I do 2 a day, so 54. So Lori says, have either of you had to deal with hair loss since menopause? And are there any foods to help? My hair is anything. I need a haircut. That's the one thing how Corona is affecting me. I can't get a haircut.
Oh, I know. The hair thing, you really notice this. Yeah, actually, I did have some hair loss around menopause, and a lot of it came back. So I think that it's just like when you're pregnant and you don't lose any hair, so you get all this gorgeous hair, and then you have a baby and you lose half your hair. So the whole hormonal thing, I think, is big. And I think it's possible that those bioidentical hormones help me to get the hair back. Um, I don't think it's all come back, but it's certainly much improved. And I don't even think about it anymore until you ask your questions. So it must be better. So I would just read. They say that biotin is good for that. My understanding is that the scientific studies looking at biotin and this kind of keratin structures of the body, they've looked mostly at nails, and they know for certain biotin does help nails grow better and break off less. And so they extrapolate from that biotin, which is a B vitamin, might also help with hair. There's just a lot you can read and a lot you can try. Minoxidil, Rogaine is the only thing that I know of that's FDA approved. I'm sure it was tested on animals at some time down the pike. So that's just something somebody would have to think about personally. There's some other things that you take, but I think they mostly have fish extractives in them. So good luck with that, but it can come back. It can improve once you're through the hormonal crazies, and I hope it'll be that way for you.
Great. And do you take any other supplements? Emma wants to know. I just take B12.
Yeah, I do. I mean, and part of that is because anything that is out there that can make my life better, as long as someone has not convinced me that it has some kind of problem to it, I just want to partake of that. So I'll answer the question, but first I want to tell one last story. This is from one of my favorite movies. I love old movies. I mean, Turner Classic Movies couldn't survive without me because I just love them. And there was one from the 50s starring Kim Novak, and it was called Bell, Book, and Candle. And it was about a group of modern at that time, witches. And did you know that if you're a witch and you fall in love with a mortal, you lose your magical powers? So that was happening for Kim Novak. And
Aw.
at holiday times, she wanted to give her Aunt Queenie a lovely gift. So she gave her a scarf. And Aunt Queenie, played by Hermione Gingold, opens the scarf and says, "But what does it do?" And Kim Novak said, "It makes you look ravishing." And Aunt Queenie said, "Oh," clearly disappointed. So that is my food philosophy. I don't just want food that feeds me and then I'm not hungry anymore. I want food to be magical. I want it to have these substances in it that are going to make me happier, healthier, younger, stronger, whatever it is. So that's why I like things like kale and wild blueberries and all these wonderful foods that have got oomph power in them. And I look at supplements in the same way. So I don't believe in just taking willy-nilly supplements all over the place just because they happen to be out there. But my strategic supplement plan is as follows. I take Complement. And this is a wonderful company. They're all vegans. Dr. Joel Kahn is involved, Matt Frazier, the no meat athlete, Pamela Ferguson, RD, a registered dietitian in Toronto. And what they were looking at was, in the best of all possible diets, what could be missing? Just because even people that eat the best of all possible diets travel and whatnot, and maybe it always isn't the very best possible. And so they came up first with their first product. It's just called Complement, and it's vitamin B12, which Chef AJ mentioned. You know, we can't get away from vitamin B12. I mean, that is the little rent that we pay for being vegan, and it's really cheap for all the benefits that we get. But also vitamin D3 for those of us who are avoiding the sun or who live north of Atlanta, and the fully formed omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA. So Complement is a spray. But then they came up with capsules that also have selenium, zinc, magnesium, vitamin K2, and iodine. And I think I didn't leave anything out. So anyway, that's what I take. I take 3 of them a day, which is what's, suggested. And I really feel good doing that. And did I say zinc? I think I said zinc, because right now with the corona thing, zinc and selenium keep popping up. Zinc and selenium in China, the people who were dying early on were all low in zinc, and the people that got the disease and didn't die had adequate selenium levels. So I do that. And just now, because of the coronavirus, I'm also taking quercetin, which is a plant polyphenol, which supposedly has some ability to keep viruses from inhabiting cells. Don't know for sure about that, but it's a plant thing, and I don't think it's hurting me. And the placebo effect is real, if nothing else.
Wow, terrific. We have a very nice comment. Where did it go? From somebody. What goes so? Oh, Kathleen says, AJ, are you two not sisters? So many things alike and so many good qualities. Just a joy listening to today's podcast. Okay, so one last question, and then we must say goodbye because I'm hungry. Julie said, what are your thoughts on garbanzo bean pasta like banza? Do you eat it? What do you both do for pasta? So I think if somebody's going to eat pasta, the one ingredient pasta is probably the best, but I personally do not eat any processed grains.
I seldom eat pasta, but my husband loves it to pieces. So we usually get a gluten-free linguine that's not too bad. It's certainly not the meal that I make and say, wow, I really feel like I got Aunt Queenie's special super nutrient dinner this time. So I have extra salad.
And how do people stay in touch with you?
Oh, that's so kind. Everything is at mainstreetvegan.net. You can subscribe there to my newsletter and weekly blog. You can listen to the podcast. There's also a pop-up right now with an ebook that I did called Your Little Immuno Guide plus Soul Soothing Tips. So that's kind of my contribution to helping people get through the current situation. And there's a contact box there. Would love to hear from everybody.
That's great. Well, it's just been wonderful spending a little special time with you on the week
Thank
of our
you.
milestone birthdays. I'm so sorry we couldn't see each other in person, but this is the next best thing. And thanks everybody for watching, and make sure you head over to Main Street Vegan and check out the podcast, and on April 1st, the movie on Amazon Prime. And thank you so much for all you do for the animals, the planet, and people.
Thank you, Chef AJ. Back at you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys. And come back. Let's see, who am I doing tomorrow? Tomorrow is Jocelyn Grafe, a wonderful vegan cookbook author. And Saturday, we have Doug Lyle. So thanks so much for watching. And thanks again, Victoria. Take care, everyone.
Bye.